Honorable Justice Mahadevan, Thiru Gopalaswamy, Thiru Subrata Bakshi, Thiru K. Rajan, Thiru P.J. Cherian, Thiru Udayachandran, and Thiru Balakrishnan, and Thiru Sundar Ganeshan, and honored guests and friends. Today, I think, is a great day in the history of India. And it gives me great pleasure to be here to witness the release of a book that will forever change the way we understand the history of Tamilakam, the Dravidian culture and languages, and their intimate connection with the Harappan civilization. I have no idea of how to express my thanks and gratitude to Mr. R. Balakrishnan for the way he has brought to life the connections between the Harappan or Indus Valley civilization and southern India. My only regret is that the great scholar of Indian civilization, epigraphist and author, Airavata Mahadevan, is not here today to witness the coming to fruition of the work that he began decades ago to illuminate the secrets of the Harappan civilization. In the acknowledgement of my own book, Early Indians, the very first mention is that of Airavata Mahadevan. My meeting him a couple of years ago at his home in Chennai was the most memorable experience I had while meeting with many leading academicians and scientists from around the world over the last many years. That is because of the sharpness of his observations and his very accurate insight that while the Harappan heritage is shared by the Dravidian as well as Indo-Aryan speakers, its linguistic heritage lies with the Dravidian languages today. Recent genetic discoveries have validated his insight because we now understand from studies based on ancient DNA that when the Harappan civilization declined around 1900 BCE, almost 4,000 years ago, its inhabitants spread out both to North India, east towards North India and south towards South India. But while the arrival of Indo-European language speakers from Central Asia in the following centuries caused a language shift in North India from Proto-Dravidian to Indo-European, the language of the Harappans continued and thrived in southern India, becoming Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, and so on. This, I would say, was the core of Airavata Mahadevan's insight and will continue to be his lasting legacy to Indian history apart from the decipherment of the Tamil Brahmi script. That he lit 1,000 fires of scholarly inquiry that are beginning to bear fruit today, as in Balakrishnan's new book, Journey of a Civilization, will be an equally consequential legacy. My deep-felt gratitude to the legacy of Airavata Mahadevan and to Balakrishnan for carrying forward that in a befitting manner. If I were to make a prediction, the most lasting legacy of this new book, Journey of a Civilization, is likely to be its keen insight that to understand ancient history of Dravidian languages and culture and the Sangam literature and its context, we need to see ancient Tamilakam not within its current boundaries, but within a much larger geographical context that includes northwestern India. I will quote, as Balakrishnan puts it, the absence of any literature or document on the ethos of the Indus Valley civilization in Vedic texts and other early Sanskrit texts explains the hiatus, the void. On the contrary, if we give a visual form to the life portrayed in the ideologies celebrated in Sangam texts, that void can be filled. In fact, the Indus Valley civilization geography fits into the landscape-specific way of life portrayed in Sangam texts. It accounts for the Palai Thinai, desert-like wasteland, portrayed in Sangam texts, including camels, which does not exist in the southern geography. The Sangam texts talk about camels, which are not to be seen in southern geography. Stunning, isn't it? My book, Early Indians, was also began with the by the desire to understand who the Harappans were. That was its original impulse. It always amazed me and continues to amaze me that we did not really feel connected to the Harappan civilization. It was the largest civilization of its time, as big as the Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations put together. But when we read about it in school or elsewhere, we read about it as we read about the Egyptians or Mesopotamians, without a real feeling that we are reading about our own history. And we never knew why or where they disappeared, or why did it take more than 1,000 years, nearly 1,500 years, for cities to rise up again in India once their civilization started declining about 3,900 years ago. When I went to see the most stunning Harappan site in India, Dholavira, in the Kutch district of Gujarat, it was surprising for me to find that there were few people there to visit it. Again, making it clear that he had clearly wiped out the Harappan civilization from our cultural memories. There are ancient sites from a later period that are pilgrimage sites and find mention and are therefore part of our consciousness, but there are no Harappan cities that have similar hold on our imagination. And this was very peculiar, especially because the Harappan civilization was unique in many ways that set it apart from other civilizations of its time, and its continuing imprint on our life, daily practices, and beliefs is still visible, though we have forgotten about where these came from. Balakrishna's new book will serve to peel back layers of our cultural forgetfulness and see the route that our traditions and practices took in the distant past. For example, did you know that among the thousands of seals that have been recovered from Harappan cities, there is not even one that clearly depicts human-on-human violence? There are seals that depict human-on-animal conflict or human-on-supernatural beings in conflict, but none that depicts humans and humans being violent towards each other. There is one possible exception to this rule, and it is a seal showing a woman with two men on both sides, with swords in their hands raised above their heads pointing at each other. But this at most reflects personal violence, not war or human groups fighting each other. This is surprising because other civilizations of the same time, especially in Mesopotamia and elsewhere, human-on-human violence and war and violence were a common depiction on seals. We cannot surmise from this that the Harappans were non-violent, because they were humans like everyone else, and it would be unrealistic to expect them to be anything other than violent like other humans. But what we can say is that there was no valorization or deification of violence in the way that other civilizations seem to do. In Mesopotamia, there are royal burials where the kings and queens were buried with huge treasures, and sometimes they were buried with their servants to serve them in their afterlife. You cannot find such burials in the Harappan sites, nowhere. There are no royal burials, neither are they buried with huge treasures or servants. And this is not because they did not have large treasures. In fact, many of the precious jewelry that was buried with the royals in Mesopotamia were created in the Harappan civilization. So our ancestors in Harappa, it seems, just had a different sensibility and culture. It's not surprising, therefore, to see that in the Kiradi excavations that are going on, we find a similar sensibility without large symbols of religion and war. The journey of a civilization, therefore, is a critical book because it unambiguously and clearly peels away our memory loss and takes possession of the Harappan civilization and claims it as our own. As I said, when I started on this book, on my book Early Indians 7 years ago, the objective was merely to look at new discoveries from across disciplines and see how far or closer we are to finding answer to the question who the Harappans were. But then you realize that to answer the question who the Harappans were, you need to first figure out who the first farmers of India were, because you can see from the archaeological record in the northwestern India that agriculture began spreading across that entire region around 9,000 years ago, 7,000 BCE, and that slowly they develop into villages over thousands of years, and about 5,000, and then villages come up, and villages become fortified, and fortified villages then give way for the Harappan cities. And the whole process took about 4,000 to 5,000 years or more. And so the question of who were the Harappans then for me changed to who were the first farmers. And you realize that you can't really answer the question who were the first farmers unless you realized who the first Indians were. So the book became larger and larger and settled finally on the question of who are we, the Indians. Now, of course, we know the answer to the question, who are the Indians, with a far higher degree of clarity than we ever did. We are the result of 4 major migrations into this country, starting with the first modern humans, Homo sapiens, who arrived here around 65,000 years ago. These are the out of Africa migrants who moved out of Africa into the Arabian Peninsula and then went on to populate all the rest of the world. These are the first Indians whose ancestry, now we know, we did not know earlier, still forms the bedrock of Indian society. The second migration, this was the first migration, the second migration brought a population related to the early agriculturists of Iran, especially in the Zagros mountain region, and around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. And they mixed with the first Indians already in India and created the Harappan civilization. So the Harappans, now we know, are a mixed population of first Indians who arrived here 65,000 years ago and the migrants from West Asia. Their language, now we know, was likely to have been a Proto-Dravidian or an ancient precursor to today's Dravidian languages. And my book talks about a lot of evidence that looks at what these links were, but one is particularly telling. The Harappans had close trade and other links with the Mesopotamian civilization, and one of those links is fascinating. The Mesopotamians used to cultivate sesame, a crop that is grown in the Indus Valley and is not a natural inhabitant of West Asia. The name of the crop of sesame in the Mesopotamian language of Akkadian is noteworthy. It is called Ellu, the same word that is used for sesame in all Dravidian languages today. In other words, the one crop that Mesopotamians imported from the Harappan civilization carries a Dravidian name, Ellu, clearly suggesting that the Harappans spoke an early Dravidian language. This is in addition to other linguistic evidence. I will give a short break. The third migration, these are 2 migrations. The third migration was from East Asia, who brought the Austro-Asiatic language family to India. These are languages such as Khasi and Mundari that are spoken by tribals in central India and eastern India, and they are closely linked to the Mon Khmer family of languages spoken in Vietnam, in Laos, parts of Thailand, and so on. And the last major migration, the fourth one, was from the Central Asian steppe, from regions today known as Kazakhstan, who brought Indo-European languages to India between 4,000 to 3,500 years ago. They called themselves Arya and caused a language shift in North India from pre-Aryan or Proto-Dravidian languages to Indo-European languages. Today, almost all population groups in India carry ancestries from all these 4 migrations in different proportions. Now, while my book, Early Indians, uses linguistics and genetic and archaeological studies to suggest the links between Tamilakam, Dravidian language, and the Harappan civilization, Balakrishnan's path-breaking book, The Journey of a Civilization, goes much farther, using place names, and particularly the Sangam literature and ancient pottery. These are pathways that had not been explored before to prove the links in a very, very robust manner. This book would be necessary reading to anyone who today wants to understand the Indian civilization, its connections with the Harappan civilization, and its continuity and looming presence in all Dravidian languages and in Tamilakam. By looking at the trail of pottery traditions, the book meticulously explains where the Harappans went and what practices and culture they took with them. This is a book that was waiting to be written, and it has filled a gaping void in our understanding of a crucial period in our history, the period that connects the second urbanization in the first millennium BCE and the Harappan civilization. As Balakrishnan writes in the epilogue, certain tribes and Dravidian tribes of central and eastern India even today appear to portray life as described in the Sangam text. And in contemporary Deep South, we discern, in Sangam text, and in contemporary Deep South, we discern the archaeologically inferable social and cultural context of the Indus Valley civilization. Northwestern India has been the entry point for many cross-cultural influences, and hence the Harappan language or languages and core cultural markers would have faced tremendous stress from the external influences in that region during the post-Harappan period. Thus, main telltale markers for the Indus Valley legacies are more likely to be traced in Deep South and Eastern India, which were relatively less exposed to such influences. From pottery traditions to bronze casting, the geographic descriptions that appear in the Sangam literature to the current living traditions of various Dravidian language-speaking communities in central India, this book is a treat and filled with compelling evidence. From today, I think no one can rightfully say that we do not know where the Harappans went. We know where they went and where their culture went. They're among us and they are us. So, thank you to everyone, most of all to Balakrishnan and the Roja Muthaiya Research Library for bringing out this beautiful book at the current juncture of our history when facts and therefore truth matter more than ever. Thank you very much.